documentary contains content about suicide. If you are in need of support, please contact Lifeline at 13 11 14. Or if you or somebody you know needs immediate support, please contact emergency services and 000. Our community is facing increased challenges that are affecting an individual's mental health, resulting in increased risk of suicide. What you are about to hear are the voices of those who have been impacted by suicide. Mental health does not discriminate, and more help is needed for those in our community who are affected by mental health and suicide. These are the personal stories of a wide-ranging section of our community. They share their powerful and moving experiences of grief, loss, and the journey in which they have travelled. Throughout this video, we recognise and draw attention to the significant challenges faced by those in our community to gain access to the right supports. But there is hope. Welcome to the Voices Project.
My name is Vicky Mendick and I lost my husband Peter and daughter Chelsea to suicide.
My name is Lindsay Walker. I'm Vicky's partner now.
I lost my husband and daughter 6 years ago within 5 months of each other. My husband had no history of mental health issues at all. My daughter struggled a little bit with anxiety up and down, but at the time of her passing was actually the best week she'd had. Peter was one of the most together people I'd actually ever met. He always had the answers to everything. Nothing was ever a problem. He never really stressed. Well, not that we saw anyway. Yeah, it was a really big shock. It was not on my radar ever actually. Never would have thought he would be the type of person to take his own life. So Chelsea was Daddy's little girl, very, very close with her father. She did struggle on and off with anxiety and mental health issues prior. So she had one attempt a month after Peter and we took her to hospital. She promised that she wouldn't try again. Been on and off the phone with the GP. He was really good. She didn't click with the first counsellor. It was hard to get an appointment. It was on and off. Yeah, she just struggled. She just struggled, really struggled. I thought she'd turned a corner and she was dealing with things a little bit better, but yeah, obviously not.
I was diagnosed with depression when I was about 14 and continued on until now, and I received counselling and help from about the age of 14 to 19.
I suffered from childhood trauma and started suffering from mental illness at a young age. I first started showing signs of anxiety when I was in primary school, followed me all through high school and to this day. I was bullied through my early high school days. Ended up transferring over high schools. Had a bad experience in a relationship that led me to have a pretty severe eating disorder. And my eating disorder became a very loud voice in my head.
My name's Alison Bryson, and you can possibly tell from the accent that I'm not local. I'm from Scotland in the UK. So in 2010, I was 41 years old and I was working. I'm someone who's had a really happy childhood. I went to university, like school, went to university, met my husband there, was happily married, working full time. It was just the two of us. And in 2010, I noticed that I was struggling to complete a work task. I was trying to recruit some staff and I couldn't do the timetable. So all I needed to do was match names, times and rooms, and I couldn't do that. And I didn't understand why I couldn't do that. And one Friday morning going to work, I felt my mind really speed up. So it suddenly went really fast. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll tell them this, I'll tell them that. And my mind was just going at such a speed. And I spent the day telling my boss the difficulties I was having. And he reassured me, and I left that night and I still didn't have a timetable. And my husband said, it's okay, you've got the weekend, you'll be able to do it. And he tried to tell me what he would do. And it felt like it was going in one ear and then it was becoming all jumbled up and I didn't understand what he was saying, or I still couldn't do anything about it. That morning, 3:30 in the morning, I bolted upright and I ran to get my laptop and tried to get it to work because I needed to work. And my husband heard me and came and said, come back to bed. And on the Saturday, I had this blank Word document with just 3 words at the top: funeral celebrant interviews. And I couldn't add anything to it. By the Sunday, I had thoughts of harming myself. And I didn't recognise myself. I didn't know what was happening to me, but I couldn't explain it. And the obvious question is, how did you seek help? And I didn't. I went to work on the Monday and saw my manager, and we had a conversation and I explained that I still didn't have the timetable. And he said, we're going round in circles, Alison. I'm really concerned about you. So he called my husband and said he was sending me home. And together my husband and I tried to find some rationale for this. And my dad had been unwell and we thought, well, maybe I'm really worried about him. He was up in Scotland. So my family and my husband decided maybe I should spend a few days with them. And so that day, my husband put me on a flight, my parents picked me up. And I spent the next couple of days with them. On the Wednesday, my husband called and we were having a conversation and he said, what happens next? And I didn't know what he meant. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you've left work, you've gone up to Scotland, what happens next? And I didn't know. And that not knowing just sent me into an absolute spin. And I left the house, I ran out the house, I ran down the road, I had these thoughts inside my head, and so thoughts are dropping down and they're bouncing and they're hitting me from left and right. And it's things like, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be found out, you're not doing a good job, you're letting people down. And I just wanted it to stop.
So my name's Kelly, my son's name's Kai. He was 20 years old when he ended his life in October last year. So we noticed a change in his mental health at around age 15. He was losing interest in a lot of things like school and sports, and not wanting to socialise as much, and was sleeping a lot. So he progressively went downhill up to the age about 18. I think during lockdown was probably when he really started to struggle. He wasn't allowed to do any of his favourite things like skating and football. So he was in the mental health unit for about 7 days. He was then released on supervised leave and discharged after about another week. So about 10 days into his supervised leave, he took his life. They gave Kai a mood stabiliser. So the mood stabiliser did help with his moods, but I think it masked the symptoms of his behaviour and the fact that he was probably withdrawing from the first attempt that he'd had by overdose. He was diagnosed with depression from a GP after the first time he went to hospital. There was a very brief GP appointment and they just gave him the antidepressants, and that's the only time he was ever diagnosed with anything.
I'm Sally Beavis, and my husband Troy ended his life on the 27th of May 2022, age 49. So Troy's battle was very short. He started not sleeping in early March 2022, which was very out of the ordinary for him. He always didn't have a problem going to sleep. And so we went to get a doctor's appointment. We couldn't get a face-to-face for 2 weeks, so we did telehealth. The doctor prescribed him some melatonin, and that didn't do anything. So 2 weeks later, we rang again. Same thing, couldn't get a face-to-face with the doctor, so did telehealth. The doctor prescribed him an antidepressant because the anxiety was starting to kick in, and upped his sleeping tablets to a temazepam. That helped a little bit. He was starting to get a few more hours sleep, maybe 4 or 5 hours sleep would be tops, but the anxiety was was horrendous. Like, he was so stressed about. On the 30th of April, he had a breakdown, and he just lost all perspective. He could not, he was saying things that weren't true. He thought he was going to lose his job, and he thought we were going to go broke. And neither of those things were true, but you just couldn't change his perspective. He was convinced he was a fraud, he was a fake, he was everything. Yeah, so that lasted for 4 weeks. So they started counselling, and so he went for 3 counselling sessions, all of which we had to rely on cancellations because we couldn't get into an appointment. But he did go 3 times. The day before he died, he went to a counselling session as well. But yeah, the next day, on the 27th of May, he ended his life.
So my name's Brock. I'm 36. I live with PTSD, anxiety and depression, and I attempted to take my own life when I was 30, and recently I got very close as well. When I was 17, I went to a party and had a good time, and later that night I found myself alone on a beach and I was assaulted by a group of people. The first time in my life I thought I was going to die. Being a male in the early 2000s, we're brought up to not show emotion, not cry, always be strong, and that was how I was brought up by my family. I had a lot of shame that happened to me, and about a year later I fell into a spiral of depression and started to think about taking my own life. I was taken up to my GP, who at the time diagnosed me with PTSD, anxiety and depression, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And I remember my mother was there with me, and her first response was, but he's not military. He's 17 years old, 18 years old, like he's so young, how does he have this? And then in March 2007, a car lost control in front of me, and I was just wrong place, wrong time. Here I was again, another near death. What is going on? Like, how many mirrors did I break, or, you know, that sort of stuff. It was just real bad luck. My mental health got worse. That's 2 near deaths, straight up. I, being a male, was very avoidant. I moved 5 hours away from my family and my friends. Everything I knew, everyone that knew me, didn't know me anymore. I'd run away. I'd cost friendships with my own anger and behaviours, so I had to start fresh. I met a woman, the typical fairy tale. We moved in together, we bought a house together, we got married, we had a child. When my child was born, my mental health decided to knock on my head, and it decided to tell me, hey, I'm still here, Brock. You've been not looking at me for years. And I started to really think about how I didn't deserve to have this child and this successful marriage and this successful career and a happy life. I then, after a while, got help. I got medicated and I started to improve, but my brain told me that I didn't have mental health issues. I was okay, I was fine. So I stopped taking my medication. And I went down a path of destruction. Partying a lot. I gave my child to my ex-wife and I took off. I actually went to work and checked my emails. It was a Saturday, who does that? But I went and checked my emails because work was more important than me. That night, I attempted to take my own life. And I woke up the next day and was like, well, that didn't work. Let's try again. So the next night, I attempted again. And then woke up on the Monday and went to work because I obviously wasn't doing it right. In my head, that's what I was saying. And I remember in the workplace actually saying to one of my staff who reported to me that I had tried, and his response was, I'm glad you're here today. My brother showed up to my apartment. I had music blasting just to keep me alive. I was just trying to be in the moment, and I had a photo of my child in my hand. I was holding it, the framed picture, to keep me there. And I sat with my back against the wall, so I was safe. There was no one could come up behind me and get me. Because having been assaulted, you're hypervigilant. And I went to bed and I just slept. My brother told work that I wasn't coming in, and they were messaging, what's going on, mate? Tell us what's going on. And they were more worried about their workplace than me. So this was a big change on me. Like, this made me realise that I was living to work not working to live. I spoke to my brother and we went and saw my psych, and I remember she looked at me and went, Brock, I've told you before, it's time for you to go to hospital. It's time for you to stop avoiding this. It's time for you to get better.
My name is Laura. I'm 21 years old. I first tried to end my life when I was 19, then when I was 20, and at 21. So I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression when I was 14. Saw a psychologist for a while. Didn't have the best experience, but yeah, and then I later on was diagnosed with anorexia. My grandmother, she also still struggles, unfortunately, to this day, like with anorexia. So, and then also with bipolar disorder at 17, and then later borderline personality disorder when I was 21. Yeah, I just felt not super motivated, and like I didn't really know who I was, and I just thought that was normal until I was diagnosed, and then I realized like, yeah, it helped me, I suppose, like with understanding myself better. I tried like throughout my life a lot of different medication. It's just about finding the right thing that works for you. Some of them really dulled me out, made me feel worse than I did, like just no emotions whatsoever. Others had a bit of like nasty side effects, but I'm currently on a medication that really works for me, and yeah, that's to stop me from going into a manic episode.
My name is Kate. I'm 42. I live with type 2 bipolar disorder, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. My story began when I was 13. I lost an uncle who took his own life, and it dramatically changed the course of my life. So my uncle wasn't well. He was in hospital for quite some time. He actually took his life on his 25th birthday, so he was very young, and he'd gotten out of hospital and we all thought he was okay and were saying how well he was doing, and then so it was a big shock to wake up one morning and have my parents give me the news. It was my first experience with death and my first experience with suicide, so it left me very confused because I didn't have that knowledge that people could choose to remove themselves from this world, and that really played on my mind for a really long time. And by the time I was 15, I started having my own struggles with depression. I actually had to leave school, was put on medication. I started drinking at a really young age, and by the time I was in my early 20s, I was drinking daily. I was treated for depression. I actually moved overseas for a couple of years just to run away for a while and explore the world. And this was amazing for me. Like, that changed my life dramatically. Having those couple of years to step away from life and have no responsibilities and just travel and have fun. It was also a good way to mask my drinking because everybody in Europe drank in the day, all through the night. And I really felt like I fit in and was able to live that lifestyle. It all came to a head when I was about 27. I experienced a period of hypomania. I thought I was Wonder Woman. I remember those first feelings of mania being like I was finally an adult and I finally had it figured out and this is how everybody lived normally. But then that slowly escalated and then became unmanageable, and then I started to go downhill. So I started to get paranoid. I thought everyone was talking about me. I thought people were out to get me. I ended up with my GP one day and she sent me straight up to hospital. So that was my first hospitalisation, was at the age of 27. And that's where I would get diagnosed with type 2 bipolar. I went to uni, got a degree, fell pregnant. I put a lot of pressure on my unborn baby because I thought that he would cure me of everything and I'd be so happy to be a mother that nothing else would matter, and all that depression would go away and all those thoughts of unease would go away because I'd be caring for somebody else. When my son Drew was born, it was an amazing time in my life. He was so loved and I tried my best to be the best mum I could be, but I was really struggling. And so I stopped breastfeeding quite soon so I could have a drink. And then I found that the drinking was balancing me back out, and I really thought I was a better mother after a few glasses of wine because I could tolerate things better. I was on maternity leave, so I started drinking in the daytime again, and I lasted about 10 months and crashed in a really big way. An ambulance had to come to my house and take me back up to hospital. This was the first time that the drinking sort of came into the story. So a social worker actually came up to me and said, "Who looks after your baby when you drink?" And I was mortified. I actually wanted to slap her because I thought, how dare she question my skills as a mother? But looking back, she was just doing her job. And this hospitalisation for me would start a cycle of being well for a while, becoming suicidal, wanting to take my life, making plans to take my life, and then inevitably ending up back in the mental ward again. When I was about 4 years ago, I had my worst depressive episode and I decided that I would take my life. I honestly thought that my son would be better off if I wasn't here. I honestly thought that my partner would raise him better than I ever could because I couldn't manage. I didn't know how to live anymore.
Denial was the first feeling that I felt really strongly. I couldn't believe it had happened once, let alone twice. I was very angry as why it had happened, and sad, very, very, very sad. Yeah, I have 3 sons and they all dealt very differently with it. And I think the same denial was the first big one. How has this happened?
And I suppose for me it kind of feels like at times I see Vicky and she could be good one day and then the next day it's like she is a little bit blank and I don't know where she's gone with that.
The boys will talk about their feelings, some better than others, but they do agree that, like Peter was 48 when he passed away, he was brought up to be tough, don't cry, don't tell anybody if anything's wrong, suck it up, basically that type of thing. Whereas, yeah, the boys I can see are very different, especially with what's happened. Yeah, that they will open up and talk if they're not feeling okay.
I remember feeling a strong sense of helplessness, not knowing where to go and what to do, what way to turn. While getting help, I still felt the helplessness. I had to beg for a lot of my treatment. Felt like I was a bit more of a paycheck than someone that was genuinely cared about.
I remember feeling like a really big burden. Like I always had to have eyes on me, like I couldn't be trusted to be by myself or do my own things or enjoy my own company. With mania I had very high highs and very low lows, and I think that confused a lot of people as well. So my lows weren't taken very seriously because I had such high highs.
I remember feeling that I just didn't recognise myself, and that was incredibly frightening because I'd always had a really strong sense of my own identity. Mum had always taught me that before we're anyone's father, mother, daughter, husband, whatever, we're us, we're me, I'm Alison. And so suddenly not to have this sense of identity, not to know who I was, to not recognise myself was incredibly frightening. So I remember being confused, really, really confused. I remember being frightened, but I remember also not being able to express that, to say that. And I don't know why, because I'm usually quite an open person, I'm quite a talkative person, I'm quite articulate, I suppose. And so not being able to tell people about this was so bizarre and so strange. So it was a confusing time. On the other hand, it was a time of complete numbness. So I didn't feel any emotion, nothing touched me. You know, I wanted to cry, but there were no tears because nothing seemed to penetrate what I was feeling.
Yeah, so after his first visit to the hospital, I remember just feeling anxious all the time. I was always checking in with him, just making sure he was doing all right. So the night he attempted suicide was very distressing, overwhelming. He went missing, so there was a police report put out, so that was pretty scary. And then even going into the hospital, we were frantically trying to find what we needed to do next. There was a lot of helplessness, fear, just not knowing what our next steps were going to be. So when Kai ended his life, I just remember feeling disbelief and shock. It was almost like disassociated. I just remember screaming and it was just... And then even the days following, I remember feeling weak, just not knowing what was going on.
Panic, absolute panic, because I didn't know what to do, never had anything to do with mental illness in the past or knew anybody that had struggled. I knew he was down on his luck, but I didn't know that he would do something like that. I asked him twice during that 4-week period because I didn't understand what was happening, and he said, no, why would I do that? I love you and the kids. I would never do that. His sister is a mental health nurse. She was involved. Same thing, she didn't see it. He masked it extremely well, but I was calling his sister, I was calling one of my closest friends, worked for Lifeline, I was calling her. Nearly every day I'm saying, well, he's doing this now and he's doing that now, what am I going to do now? And I just had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. Devastation. Still devastation. Yeah. He's left an enormous void in our lives. Yep. You don't get 1,500 people to your funeral unless you meant something to people. And he died thinking that he was nothing. And that's sad. Breaks my heart. Sorry, I've got his hanky. It's just such a horrible thing. I don't think they'll ever understand it. I don't think. But we had everything to look forward to, and when I found him, it was all horrendous. So devastation would be the word.
So before this attempt, like my first attempt at 19, it was at a time where I'd just been broken up with by my partner, and I'd never been single since moving out of home. Like, it's like the worst feeling ever to be abandoned, and I just wanted to do anything to escape that feeling. And so I just felt the worst dread that I've ever felt in my life. I don't wish it on anyone, like being diagnosed with bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder, but I just wish that I had found that, like, the right help sooner. And so with like the really high highs being mania, the first mania I experienced was at age 20, and I'd say it was the most destructive period of my life, and I did a lot of hurtful things that I wouldn't have done in my normal state. And getting over that guilt, and I still experience, like, to this day, flashbacks of mania, that guilt of knowing that, yes, I wasn't in my right state of mind, but I still did these things that I really regret. And it's hard to explain, I think, to the people that you love and the people that you've lost as a result of that manic state, that it's not an excuse, it's more a reason.
Both positive and negative experiences with seeking help. Peter didn't seek help because he had no history. He may have been struggling, but he didn't tell anybody. With Chelsea, our GP was fantastic. He would fit her in whenever she needed to go. He was really good. He referred her on with a mental health plan. She did see a couple of counsellors, but she hadn't clicked with anybody. I did ring a helpline as the doctor told me to for Chelsea one night, but I didn't have a very good experience with that. But I have had some good experiences with seeking help after the event. I've had a really good counsellor that I still speak to today.
I know that I've been successful in talking to some people, and other people, at least if they talk, they might talk out what they're feeling at the moment, and that could be a little gold nugget to them, because in a week's time they've talked all that out and they might have moved a little bit further ahead in their journey.
My advice also is continue to look for somebody that you do click with. I did count up one day, I can't remember if it was 9 or 14 counsellors that I actually saw before I clicked with that one, and I still, 5 years later, I still do see her.
And one of the biggest, most powerful things I've ever heard Vicky say is that what kept her going in that, especially those initial stages, and it was 3 boys. She goes, they're all I've got, so I have to keep going for them. And that was something that very much touched me.
In seeking help, I had a mixture of both. I felt mainly pretty negative. I don't feel like there's enough support systems in place out there. Trying to take my life multiple times. The last time that I had tried, they tried to send me home again, and it was actually me who had to beg to stay and beg to have a place where I can be safe from myself. I've called the call line a couple of times, same thing, positive and negative experiences, and it's different for everyone. My experience with mental health professionals were pretty good. When I was 14, I was a part of the CAMS, and I had a really good psychologist through there, and then I had stopped seeing them and moved on to another psychologist, which she was good, but I did feel like a bit of a paycheck to her. She wasn't really giving me sufficient solutions to what I needed, or understanding where I was coming from. Made me feel like a little bit of a lost cause, and it was way too expensive to keep up. My experience with GPs were positive and negative as well, until I found a GP that understands my health and my physical health and my mental health. And I do rely on him, and I know that I can turn to him and speak to him about how I genuinely feel, and I highly recommend getting a GP that you can open up to and be honest with. I think what's lacking is the amount of facilities. A lot of times when I needed to be admitted, the only reason I wasn't admitted was because there wasn't a bed. My parents still had to go to work, life goes on. I feel like we need a safe space that we can go to, whether it's the hospital or another facility, that's open decent hours.
I was in a really bad place, called a helpline, and I really wanted someone to just listen to sort of take away from the fact that I was struggling to breathe and crying and couldn't put a sentence together. And I don't think that whoever answered that phone call was prepared for what I was saying and how I was feeling and the way that I was acting. That after a lot of back and forth, she told me I should go home and go to bed and get a good night's sleep. And she actually hung up that phone call while I cried in my car on the side of the road. I had to stay in hospital when I was about 17 with a feeding tube in my nose. And the staff around me were very welcoming, made me feel very safe, reminded me that I was doing this to get better and that this was going to help me, and tried to make me feel as comfortable as they could. I voluntarily admitted myself into a mental health facility. When it comes to mental health facilities, I do believe that there should be a separation between the certain severities of mental health, and young people should be supported and put around people that understand what they're going through and aren't going to be triggered by your reactions to certain situations. The environment was very chaotic. I think no one really knew where to go or who to support. I think psychologists didn't really want to listen and understand the problem. They just wanted to see what medication was going to suit me best. Yeah, Band-Aid fixes.
Like she said, there was a lot of Band-Aid fixes, a lot of medication to just keep her quiet and get her through one day at a time, and sometimes that is the answer, but at the end of the day you need to get to the core issue and start working through that, rather than just trying to put a Band-Aid on top of it and hope that it's all going to be better.
I met an occupational therapist. She came to meet me and my husband, and she was from the local community mental health clinic, and she said she listened to everything right from the start, and she asked my husband questions, and she said, I think it would be really helpful if you came to the clinic just on a daily basis. So we offer classes in art and craft and Tai Chi and creative writing, and I think it would be good for you to have something to do. And I said, that's great, but the mental health clinic was in the next town, and I said, I can't drive there because I didn't trust myself to drive. And she said, that's no problem. We'll arrange patient transport for you or our volunteer driver. And even though they think they probably were just taking me to an appointment, actually they were giving me access to the outside world again. They were like a lifeline to a world that I had been excluded from. I'm often asked about the integrated care model because I think from what I've observed here, putting aside mental health, I think just in terms of health, there seems to be a much more of an emphasis of you do it yourself. So for example, if we're going to see a specialist in the UK, that's arranged by our doctor. We don't make the appointment, the specialist. Whereas here I was really surprised when my GP gave me a form and said, go off, and I said, what do I do? And she's like, you make the appointment. So I think that is a difference. And when I was unwell, when I'm really incapable, when I can't do anything for myself, how can I arrange my care? I can do it when I'm well, but I don't need the care when I'm well. I need the care when I'm really ill. But when I can't do that for myself, I get really emotional when I think about how well I was looked after and how other people that I speak to now say, I so wish I had that sort of care.
Mostly negative. Accessing GP appointments was easy, although him being the age he was, I wasn't allowed in there with him. They wouldn't give me any information. Kai wasn't much of a talker. So each time he would go to the doctor, he didn't get much from it. They said there was nothing wrong with him. I then, once he did open up saying he wanted help, I tried to get him into a psychologist, and even that was going to be at least a 4-month wait. So when he was in the hospital, he managed to escape the mental health unit, the lockdown. So he was still disorientated, managed to work his way out of 3 locked doors. He was found by the police hours later. It was a few hours before they even knew he was missing. And the only reason they knew he was missing was because we went to visit him and he just wasn't there. Kai was pretty much begging to stay in hospital, and they just wanted him out of there. He told us he didn't feel safe. They told us someone would be in contact with us. We waited. 3 days later, someone from another service contacted us, and we just didn't hear from them again. And a few days later, when Kai went downhill and we rang them to ask what we needed to do, they contacted them and found out that they'd actually discharged him without even speaking to us. When we knew Kai was being discharged from hospital, we frantically rang anyone we could think of to try and get him in. One of the local private hospitals told me that he didn't fit the criteria. They made assumptions about Kai without speaking with him, only speaking to me, not asking for any referrals or anything from a doctor. We then got him into another private. He was just waiting on a bed. He had a date set, and he was quite, I saw a change in him when he knew he was going there. He had his bags packed, he was excited to go, and was really looking forward to sort of changing his life. They rang us back the day before he was supposed to go in to tell us it was going to be another 2 weeks, and I had to tell him that, and just the disappointment in his face, and he took his life 2 days after that. Kai was given phone numbers. He kept Lifeline in his wallet, he kept it in his phone. We were given online things to do. He just wasn't interested in those things. I just think in that time of crisis, they don't think to call. I personally don't believe. There are people that it does help. It's a good thing that it exists, but I was his lifeline, and he didn't even call me in that moment. I had depression and I didn't do much about it, so I kind of suffered with it for a long time. As I got older, I've started to see counsellors, and at the moment I'm seeing two different psychologists. I do a lot of holistic healing and I find all that helps a lot.
Troy didn't really seek help. Troy had a very big issue with the stigma attached with mental health. We did have a position at the private hospital for him to be admitted, but he would not go. He said that people will think he's lost his mind and he's crazy. Even the counselling sessions, the first 2 I sat in with him, he didn't tell the truth. The third one, I sat in the waiting room and he came out and I said, "How was that?" And he said, "It's a load of shit." And he said, "It's just a load of, and I don't want to do this anymore." I think there needs to be a stronger push on mental health in the workplace. You spend most of your waking, living hours in your workplace with your work colleague. My husband's employer, 2 days before his breakdown, so he lost a lot of weight, and in the 6 weeks before the breakdown, and he always thought that he was going to be asked to take on another role within the firm. And I said, "You're not going to be able to." Everybody knew this fellow was retiring. He said, "They're going to ask me to take the job." And I said, "You already work 7 days a week." You know, I said, "You can't take on another managerial role." I said, "You'll just have to say no." And I didn't know this till after he died, but 2 days before his breakdown, they took him in and asked him to take that fellow's job. And he had already visibly lost weight. He looked terrible from lack of sleep, and he said he would take the job. Now, he hadn't had a holiday in years. He would take the leave as money because he didn't think that the company could work without him. All that has to change, you know. And after he'd asked Troy to take the job, he then looked at him and said, "Oh, you don't look so well, Troy. Should you take a little holiday, you and Sal?" But he'd already asked the question. There has to be more emphasis on and more education on mental health in the workplace. The law as it stands in New South Wales prevented me from getting Troy the help he needed on that day. I might not have saved him the next day or the day after, but I would have saved him on that day. I had power of attorney over him, and we had a bed, and I couldn't make him go. And finally, I believe we need more safe houses. I don't know whether a safe house would have been something that Troy would have gone to. I definitely would have gone to one to ask for more help, but there needs to be aesthetically pleasing places for people to go that isn't a hospital that he may have gone to.
The inpatient clinic I go to is a private hospital. Recently with my fall, I had to go there. I knew I had to go. I had to do something. And they were a 4-week wait was what they were advertising. And it's just showing now how the mental health system's been impacted. It is at a stage where it is under-resourced, underfunded, and we're just struggling to get by with some of them. So over the phone counsellor, because she's not a crisis centre, she's just my psych. I had to do it last time. I feel I had to do it last time on my own, but I also know using that service helped me a lot. So yeah, when we come back to it, I think right now the mental health sector is very under-resourced, underfunded, especially in New South Wales. But I've also heard people go in and come out worse. And if that's where you need to go because you're at that level, I encourage you to go. But there are other services out there. There is Lifeline for children under the age of 18. There is, for people under the age of 18, there's Kids Helpline. And if you are having issues, always see your GP first. Go in there and get a referral. And if you do need extra support, there are support workers out there that can help you.
So positive experiences. I remember waking up after my first attempt and I didn't remember anything from the night before. I just remember blacking out and then waking up in hospital. And I remember crying and a nurse coming over to console me because I'd realised what had happened and that my mental health had brought me to this place. I didn't get hospitalised until I was 20 years old, and that was after a particularly bad attempt, and I was in there for about a week They were nice. The psychiatrist could be a bit cold at times, but they were very understanding that yes, you do have this and it's real and it's valid and your mania was real. And so getting that validation really helped me because I'd had a therapist in the past that just wanted to downplay everything that I had going for me and tell me that I was overdiagnosed or this and that, and she would get really upset with me if I was ever like fidgeting or if I was sharing bits in my life. She would tell me that that's too much for her to handle. Yeah, when I went into mania, I remember a phone call and she was yelling at me and telling me that like I hate all women, or like it was, I didn't understand like why she was saying this. Like to me in that state, like I just thought, well, if this therapist is yelling at me and abusing me, then I shouldn't try and get help. And so that's why I wasn't on any medication. I wasn't in any treatment plan because I just didn't trust being in therapy anymore or seeing my doctor. So yeah, I'd say like being in hospital though, it was helpful, but you don't want to be in that environment for very long because it's just, in my opinion, I feel like it's there to keep you safe, to make sure that you're on the right medication and to assess you, and not only for your own safety but for other people's safety. I had a really bad experience at one hospital where they didn't believe what I was experiencing was real. They were laughing at me and telling me that I was faking it when I was having a panic attack. And at this particular point in my life, I couldn't live with housemates anymore because I just had a really terrible experience. And so because of that, I couldn't afford to live alone, so I just lived in my van. And when I told the hospital staff this, they just assumed the worst, and they assumed that I was just a homeless person looking for a bed to stay in, and that I didn't have a right to be there and get treated for what I was going through because I was experiencing suicidal thoughts.
I had an amazing GP who actually sent me back into hospital, and I underwent 10 rounds of electroconvulsive therapy, and that really shifted my thoughts for me and put me back on the right track. Came back out and I knew that I had to get sober. Unfortunately, sobriety didn't happen for me. I started drinking again and it got really bad. And for about 6 months, I was just in this cycle of buying alcohol, hiding it through the house, drinking it all, and then I'd wake up the next morning, collect all the empty bottles, go up to the supermarket, throw them all in the bin, and then go back to the bottle shop, and the whole cycle would start again. So it was really all-consuming. 3 years ago, I ended up in a detox facility down in Sydney, and I spent 3 days withdrawing off the alcohol, and then I went into a rehab facility for a month. This was an amazing time. I finally wasn't alone. I had people around me that spoke the same language of addiction. I lasted about 4 months, and then I had a really bad relapse, and the relapse lasted 3 weeks. And in that time, I was basically drunk the entire time and didn't know how else to cope with things. And then my partner finally sat me down and said, look, he was done. And I was horrified to think that I was about to lose my family. But one part of my brain, the alcoholic part of my brain, thought, I can go and live on my own and just drink how I want to drink. I just looked haggard and I looked miserable, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. And so I went up to the emergency department. They looked after me for a few hours, gave me some to help me withdraw. And then I woke up on October 18th, 2021, and that was the day I decided I would never drink again. And that's the day I've been sober ever since.
Devastation. It is definitely, like they say, a domino effect. It doesn't just affect one person, it affects so many people in so many different ways. And it is like a wave. It was explained to me, it's like a wave. You ride this wave, and that's what I said, but you just have to learn to pick yourself back up again. My three boys, that's why I pick myself up and make sure I continue every day for my three boys. And a lot of the people that come were the young people. They do all like to get involved, and yeah, they do all say, yeah, you need to open up and talk. Don't hide your feelings. If you're not feeling okay, you need to open up and speak about it.
Some people are still a little bit, how could this happen? And some are so sad. They've known Peter for 40 years of their life. But I guess for someone like Vicky, if you don't know what to say, she would rather someone go, I don't know what to say, as long as you know I'm there. And that would mean more to her than maybe so.
I don't like it ignored. I don't like it if people try and pretend that they weren't here, that this happened. It did happen, and we can't change that. But people need to support everybody, and I'm a big one to keep their memory alive, and I talk about them all the time. I share photos. Some people think I should just be letting it be, but I can't let it be. It was my husband for almost 25 years, and my daughter. I carried her inside of me.
My suicide attempt and my mental illness as a whole affected so many people around me, from my sister, my brother, my mum especially, my nan and pop, definitely my friends as well. Being so young, a lot of people don't know how to cope with it and don't know what to do and don't understand it. I feel like definitely there wasn't enough education on what to do and how to support someone if they are in that state, and that's when I ran into a lot of bullying when I was self-harming, and same with my parents not knowing how to cope.
I remember one day my dad picked me up from the mental health unit that I was staying in, and we went for a drive and just walked around the hospital car park. And when we were walking back, he told me that he was really proud of how much effort I was putting in to feel better, and that at work he was asked about one of his workmates, how I was doing, and he tried to stay strong but eventually took a knee and took the day off work and went home and just thought over things and how he felt about the situation, which I remember after my attempt, it had been a few days. I was in the mental health facility, and I was out on a walk with my mum, and she passed me her phone. My best friend was on the other line. She had no idea what was going on and hadn't heard from me for a few days. When I told her, hearing her break down on the other side of the phone really put it into perspective what I had done and how that made the people that I care about most feel. And that really changed the course of where I was and put me on a different track. While I was at probably the lowest I had been, having my younger brother be across the hallway from me, he saw a lot of my panic attacks, and was always at my door checking on me, making sure that I wasn't too upset and making sure that I was okay and that I just needed to take a second. He'd bring me in water and bring me in a jumper and a blanket and double check on me the next day, make sure that I was doing better.
It had a really big effect on my family. This was a really hard time for me, but it was even harder for them because they lost the person that they knew. I was still there. It was hard for my parents who were looking after me that night. They chose to look after me at home, but they told me later that they'd had to think about locking all the windows and the doors and hiding the keys because they knew that they couldn't let me out the house. Imagine your parents having to think about that. No one should have to think of that. So it was incredibly difficult for them. My mum said later that we'd got through things because basically I just did what I was told, and that shows that I wasn't me because I don't usually do what I'm told. But we got through it because she directed me to do things. She would tell me, I'm going to bake, start rubbing in this butter into flour. I couldn't do it on my own, I had to be told, I had to be shown. And that's why the crisis team support was so important in the 2 weeks afterwards. For my husband, I can't imagine what he went through. I really can't. Because He was trying to support me, and I was someone who needed constant reassurance, constant. He would wrap me in his arms every night and reassure me that I would get better because I didn't believe I would. But how difficult to see someone you love change in front of you, not recognise them, not recognise ourselves, to be continually asked, am I going to get better? Am I going to get better? But will I get better? And I honestly don't know how my family got through this. I know how I got through it, but I don't know how they did. Since sharing my story, my family have said that it's given them an understanding. Now they can see, now they can understand what was going on in my eyes, because they weren't able to tell that at the time.
So Kai's suicide had a huge impact on friends, family, and the community. He has 2 younger siblings, aged 5 and 10 at the time, who have been really affected by this, losing the person that they looked up to the most. It's been devastating to watch, and the effects that it's had on them. His 10-year-old brother has suffered with anxiety and panic attacks ever since, and doesn't go to school often, has nightmares, can't get to sleep at night. Yeah, they just don't understand why, and having to have those conversations around mental health and suicide with them at that age is just heartbreaking. So it's had a big impact on his friends. He was the life of the party. He was always doing things for other people, and so many of his friends already suffered with their own struggles, and like the impact that this has had on them is just, it's huge. And his friend who found him, he now has to live with that trauma on top of losing a best friend. I try and stay in contact with his friends. They have opened up a little bit. I mean, boys at that age still find it hard to open up. So Kai's suicide has helped me have more empathy for people struggling with their mental health, and it's driven me to be more of an advocate for people, and to try and make a change, for better resources and more access to services. In the way that Kai was failed by the system, I want to make a change. It's also helped me to be a lot more like he was. See more good in people, the kindness that he showed to everyone. It's just sort of gives me that I want to be more like him.
It's affected everybody enormously. His own best friends think that they didn't know him because he never ever once told them a problem. So they just are devastated. As far as the family's concerned, obviously our 3 children don't have a father now. I don't have a husband, but it's it wasn't him. He'd lost perspective. He would never do that to us. He had totally lost perspective. Just give me a sec. Do you want me to get you some water? No, I'm okay. Yep. No, none of us knew how to help. One of his best mates would come over nearly every night during that 4 weeks since his breakdown and try and show him that we weren't going broke, and that he just said they don't understand. I got his work colleagues over to say that he wasn't going to lose his job. Got them over a few times. He said, no, they're all lying. Everybody was lying to him, and there was nothing we could do to change his mind, basically. We did everything together. We never were apart. He would call me 15, 20 times a day, and people laugh at that, but it's true, he did. Maybe for 2 seconds, but now I get none. Our eldest son has had 6 weeks in a facility last year. All 3 of them have had some kind of guilt. It's just totally devastating.
to do life without him, but as sad as I am, I don't want to join him, you know, and that's the difference between somebody who's unwell, yeah, and I'm just sad that he was so unwell and we couldn't help him.
That's why I push people away. I don't want them to cry at my funeral. But I don't have control of that either, and that's something I've had to learn. I don't control other people's feelings. I can't control other people's feelings. But I was so far gone. I was stuck in the victim state. I was the victim of everything.
Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, I just personally, I felt like a real burden for wanting to help with it. When I mean, I feel like when I say help, like when you're in that point, like you just want people to validate your emotions and your feelings and what you're going through and not tell you this like positive toxicity of you'll be okay or like everyone goes through this or yeah, it was definitely hard for them because they didn't know what to say to me and so they would kind of say cliche things, but I feel like I couldn't be more grateful for my family and I can imagine like it's so hard for them having someone who has mental health struggles and not understanding like what they're going through. I remember when I was manic, I just felt like I couldn't sit in one place, and so knowing I needed help but I didn't want to go back to hospital, my brother just said, oh, I'll just come over here, and so I took the flight to the Gold Coast. And then when I finally got to my brother, I was like, I need to touch grass. I need to throw myself into the garden. And he was like, what are you doing? I managed to calm down for a bit, but he told me like the next night, like, you were just talking for ages and ages, and I couldn't understand a word you were saying. And I was lucky that he took me to a doctor and gave me a medication to help me calm down and to finally get some sleep, because I was getting up at like 4 a.m. every morning and experiencing psychosis. Like I felt like things were crawling all over me, and so I imagine it was very hard for him to deal with. Not deal with, but you know what I mean, like for him to support me during that state, it was a lot for him. So even my mum, like, yeah, she told me like after that period, like she was like, I didn't even recognize you. I felt like I lost my daughter. I definitely still get the flashbacks of like that time and how difficult it was for them, and it was hard for them to understand why I attempted purely the reason I attempted was because of the guilt that I felt from that manic episode of losing so many friends and like turning on my family.
Reverberating effects that has on everybody's life. So for instance, my grandmother was never the same. She was such a rock in my life, and after that you always saw a sadness behind her eyes. And then the way it affected me in my life, and my uncle wouldn't have even been thinking of me probably, because when you're at that point you just want everything to stop. You're not really thinking about anybody else except that I'm better off not being here. And little would he have known that him taking his life would still be affecting me 30 years later, you know, and I still think about him every day, and I still think, what if he had chosen to live, what would he be doing? And it's those after effects, I think, that always stopped me in my tracks, because I knew the ripple effect of what suicide has on a family and a community. And I also was told that my son, if I take my life, my son has a higher chance of taking his own life as well. You know, I have a really vivid memory of my uncle's funeral. As I said, I was only 13 at the time, but I just remember being there and then the casket being taken from the room and my grandmother just completely collapsing in tears. And that moment really did change me forever.
Yeah, I tried to show her, I tried to be strong, I guess, for her so that she could see that, yeah, we will all move on from this, as hard as it is. But yeah, she just, poor Chelsea just didn't, yeah, she could not cope with the fact that one of her big things was she said her father wouldn't be here to walk her down the aisle. That was one of her, that sticks into my memory. That was one big thing that she struggled with. And I think she couldn't see past that he wasn't here, so she couldn't see a life without a father, I guess. So yeah, sorry.
Oh, I just suppose that the journey I've been on, you know, we kind of got taught how to walk and talk when we were young. We never really got told how to listen. And out of all this, I personally probably learnt far greater skills at being a listener and doing the Lifeline crisis operator. You had to listen. You had to reflect people, what they were feeling, and sometimes just being there with someone and just listening and not saying anything can be incredibly powerful. You can't really fix anyone. You just got to go, I'm hearing that you're very overwhelmed at the moment. At the moment, Vicky's overwhelmed, and just be there for her.
My mum had a lot of wise words to help me through what I was going through. Just a lot of love and support. A little bit of reading really helped me as well, or seeing quotes online, just little lines that put things into perspective, that life really is too short and it's all our first time here, so everyone deals with it the best that they can, but you don't get to do it.
I booked a doctor's appointment to get a mental health plan, and when I went into the appointment, I'd started off with a few other things and just like ticking off the boxes, and when it got to the mental health plan, the GP told me that he didn't have enough time today to do a mental health plan, and that psychologists and psychiatrists can take a while to get into, so I'd be better off just finding a counsellor somewhere online and going that way rather than making a full mental health plan and being taken care of and have someone that I could rely on, like a psychologist. I was told to find an online counsellor.
Yeah, there were. And this is why language is really important. My first meeting with the psychiatrist, I don't remember much of it, but there were two words that he said that I clung to as if they were a lifeline. I was in the mental health clinic and I met this woman I'd never met before, and she gave me a card with my name on it, and a Christmas card, and she said she introduced herself. She was the lead mental health worker. And I said, I'm really grateful for the chance to come here to the clinic because I was struggling so badly on my own. She said, we know that you have no hope for recovery, so we have hope for you. And when you feel hopeless, when the situation feels absolutely helpless, someone else telling you, we have hope for you. You're going to get through this. We have hope. That was incredibly important for me.
I have actually had someone reach out to me that was struggling themselves. He's living with his parents, and I said to him, just please promise me that you don't feel like a burden to your parents. And he actually contacted me later to say thanks for saying that, because I did feel like a burden, and you saying that actually makes me realise I'm not.
A lot of things I didn't find out until after he'd passed, because I was trying to give his mates time to talk to them, and they shared things after he'd passed. At one point, a few days before Troy ended his life, he said to his best mate, I feel like I'm made of glass now and everybody can see through me. And I didn't know he'd said that until afterwards. If I'd have known every conversation he had had with people, I would have known something catastrophic was going to happen. But I didn't know those conversations until after he'd passed. That as far as conversations that I had with people, there was really nothing memorable. It was just me trying to say every day, what am I going to do now? He's doing this, he's doing that.
Well, so you always, when you're in a mental health crisis, people are always going to say the same cliche things, like things will get better, or just push through. But yeah, I don't know. It's such a blur when you're in that state. But I remember it helped, like, having people there to validate me. I had a nurse that told me, you know, you shouldn't feel guilty about what you have done. Like, yeah, things will get better. Because, I mean, for me personally, like, when I'm in a depressive episode, it feels like I'll never get out, and I'll always feel like, and so to speak to a nurse or a psychiatrist who tells you that you're not alone, like, that really helps, definitely.
Just my GP saying that I was going to get better and what I was feeling was going to pass. But you need the help to do that because you can't do it on your own.
My message would be that there is always light at the end of the tunnel, although it doesn't always feel like it, and time does heal. You don't forget the things you go through. You just learn to cope with them better over time.
Just put one foot in front of the other. Just keep going. It does get easier over time, and you start to appreciate that you can't have good days without the bad days, and the bad days will come and the bad days will go. And it makes you appreciate the good days more.
I think you possibly feel really alone, because I know I felt utterly, utterly alone. I felt that what was happening to me had never happened to anyone else before. And I'd like to say you're not alone. You're not alone. There are people who understand what you're going through. It may not seem that way, but there are. And I think hearing other people's stories and sharing how we're feeling is a really helpful way. So I would say you may feel alone, because I did, but you're not, and there is help. And I think I'd also say that I have hope for you.
There's so many people going through the same thing or something similar, and there's always someone that can help. I know everyone's situation is different, and some people feel ashamed to speak out. Some people just think that nothing could help their situation, and yeah, the stigma around mental health. But there's always help. Even if you're not a talker, there's always someone that wants to listen to you. There's someone that's been through the same thing.
Please accept the help. There are people that love you and care for you, and every problem has a solution. You just don't have to do it by yourself. Yeah, you've got to share the load, and it's okay to say that you're struggling. You know, life is crazy, and you can't do it all by yourself, and that's okay. You know, there's no stigma attached to it. You break your leg, you go to the doctors. You know, it's the same thing. It shouldn't have a stigma.
Someone said to me, and they sent me this song, it's just a bad day, not a bad life. And that's what it is. If you're struggling, it's just a rough patch. It gets better. Just focus, work on you. Focus on you, stop focusing on everything around you. If it's not in your circle of control, don't worry about it. And if you are supporting someone and they get too much, look after you as well. Put your mask on first, because if you can't help yourself, you can't help someone else. But you will come back to week by week. And I know what it's like to be hour by hour. You'll get better. You've got this.
But I think if you know someone who is struggling, or you know someone that needs help, you know, really try to support them. And I think you need like almost a little village around you to help lift you back up. I just needed support, and unless you talk about how you're feeling and how your thoughts are affecting you, it's really hard to get that help that you need. So I would just encourage everybody to have someone that you can go to when you're not feeling well, whether it's a medical professional or whether it's a friend. We all need somebody that we can be honest about how we're feeling, and that's going to lift us up and provide us with the support we need.
Everybody needs to know that it's okay to talk. If you're struggling, you need to seek help, It might not make everything better instantly, but it's a start. My motto is there's always light of a new day. Yeah, just always reach out for help. There's help available. If you can't get help straight away, just continue to reach out, because you will find the right help, hopefully, eventually.
So that hopefully through us doing You Matter and talking, that you'll hear the story. If you're in that situation where you really are struggling, you need to talk to someone. And if we can save people's lives or make people move on from here and live a better life, then that's what we're all here for.
Start trying to understand their emotions and find their good support people. Some friends will be better than others. Try and work out whether you need comfort or a solution, if you need someone to just cuddle you and help you through that moment, or if you actually want the solutions and what to do next. Learn to figure out what you need to get you through those days, and pick your people and hold them close. And just wait. Just don't act on your thoughts. Give it a minute, call someone, talk to someone who you need. Don't make any rational decisions. Just give it another day until those days get easier.
I would just talk to anyone who'll listen. Whether it's a friend, a family member, teacher, pet, a stuffed animal, literally anything. Just talk, get it out, write it down, do whatever you have to do, just get it out of your head and put it down on a piece of paper. Or
by making them feel safe, and by listening, opening up about your own experiences, helping them get the help if they don't feel like they can do it, offering to be the support person.
Asking the question, are you okay? And what does okay mean to you? You know, we ask the question, are you okay on Are You Okay Day? People say, I'm okay. What's okay to you today? We have to delve more and ask more questions.
Simple. Talk to your doctor, take their advice. If you can't get into your doctor, you've got Lifeline, you've got organisations out there, especially for toxic masculinity males like us. There are organisations out there that you can join and go to. But my advice is always get it from a reliable source. Like you've got, for example, connectedtocare.com. I have worked with other organisations sharing my story. miac.org.au is a great place to go to get resources. You've got Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Black Dog Institute. Talk to me, bro. There is so many out there now, because mental health has become something. I didn't have this. I didn't have someone come talk to me at school, and I wish I did, because it's okay not to be okay.
Find the people who will not judge you for what you're going through, who don't have that, who actually have that understanding of mental health, because those people are definitely worth fighting for. And being able to find a therapist that cares, finding a care team that cares, like a doctor, psychiatrist, and family and friends. And like, even if you don't have a family, like finding friends that can be your second family. I'd say, like, if you're struggling, definitely reach out, go to Safe Haven. The people there are really lovely, because they all are peer support workers. Like, they have a lived experience of what you're going through. And just know that, yeah, you're not alone.
I definitely think there are some warning signs that people should look out for in friends, family, workers. Definitely withdrawal, so not going out to events, missing that concert or missing that party. Change in attitude, being very negative as opposed to what they were before, and just very withdrawn to themselves, keeping to themselves, keeping quiet, sometimes not speaking enough.
when someone's in a crisis, they're really not themselves, and I think anyone who knows someone can tell when someone isn't always themselves. Some things to look for is isolating and speaking badly about themselves, even in just a funny joke on the side. It can always mean something more.
When I was at the clinic, we looked back and we created what they called a traffic light plan. Going back, we started to look at things, and I recognised that I'd withdrawn from people. So there were things that we noticed, but I would never have thought that they were an indication that I was going to be mentally unwell. But in drawing up the traffic light plan, we thought, what do you do? If you are at amber, if things are becoming a little bad for you, what do you do? And because I didn't seek help, The important thing for me is to respond. So whether that's talking to my husband, talking to my GP, talking to my family and friends, but the important thing is to respond. And because we have this traffic light plan, and my husband was involved in helping draw it up, it means that he and I can talk about things in a way that I wasn't able to before I was ill. So I found it really difficult to ask for help, but now I can say, oh, do you think that's an amber sign? And we talk about it. So we have this almost like a shorthand that makes it really easy to discuss if I think I'm becoming a little bit unwell.
I now know that when he was feeling anxious and depressed, he would get really sick, and there were, over the years, plenty of times that he would wake up through the night vomiting, but would tell me that he's all right, he just felt a bit sick. The night that he had that he first went to hospital with the suicidal thoughts, he was up vomiting all night the night before. So looking back now, I know that's a sign. The loss of motivation and the sadness and the always trying to make sure everyone else is happy. In his early adulthood, we just started to notice more mood swings.
There are definitely signs. He aged terribly. There is a photo of him 2 weeks before he died, and it doesn't look like him. His last voicemail on his phone was after his breakdown. It doesn't even sound like him. So the weight loss and the withdrawing. When I told one of his best mates 2 days before his breakdown that he wasn't well, he even said, I knew it. And I said, how did you know? He said, because the phone calls have stopped. And they would call each other most days.
Because of hope, and also losing one of my best friends made me realise how much of a domino effect it has on so many different people around me. And sometimes when you can't do it for yourself, you've got to do it for other people, whether it's your mum or your partner or your friend or your pet. Just think about them if you can't do it.
It's definitely not easy. It's a very long journey that I'm currently still on. The love I have for my family and my friends is more than anything, and I think that really does push me through to see another day, because I can't imagine what that would do to the people that I love, and I can't imagine them in a similar boat to me.
That's a combination of things. It's medication, but I'm also here because of the love and support of my family, and a bit down to my own determination to get well. I knew I wanted to get well, I just didn't know how to.
Good support from my 3 boys, Lindsay, and family and friends. I have got a nice little group of people that are always there for me, and my counsellor. And I go to a support group as well, usually twice a month, which I find helpful to be around people that do know exactly how you're feeling, because they have lost somebody as well. So I do find it good to talk with people that have been through similar situations. They do understand what you're saying.
And I find sometimes as well for Vicky, some good support is for her to like flick a switch and just go and spend some quiet time on her own, whether it's the ocean, whether it's just watching a bit of TV, just chilling out.
My support systems in hard times is definitely my mum. She's been there from the start to the finish. My fiance is a massive, massive support for me at the moment, who understands and helps me through those bad times and rides the wave with me. And also my son, even though he can't tell me, just being there always makes me feel better and puts a smile on my face and reminds me why I keep going.
My support system has been my family and my friends.
My husband. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's so positive, and I can't imagine getting through this without him, because he was just incredible to be able to put up with all the things he had to put up with. He didn't try to push me, he just really gave me support and confidence. And I think that to me highlights how important support is. And not everyone has that support. I've established networks, but also volunteer. But I think volunteering provides you opportunities that you'll never have, you'd never imagine you have. So I volunteered for the Mission to Seafarers in Newcastle. I went on to ships in the harbour, visiting as a ship visitor, meeting the captain, who often is the one person who doesn't get off the vessel. And how important is it for him to be able to speak to someone different and new? So my support network has grown. And the thing that I really love is that my network is so varied. So it ranges from young people to a friend who tells me she's 88, but I don't believe her. And it's just lovely to be able to find people that you can connect with, you can share things with, you can trust, and who you can just enjoy spending time with.
My sister has probably been my biggest support person. I think it helps having someone that's going through it in a similar way. And I find comfort in reaching out to, or just speaking to other mums that have been through child loss or been affected by suicide. Yeah, I think it just helps to be around people that were connected to Kai. Like, I probably have more to do with his friends now than I used to.
Definitely, I have amazing friends who have been wonderful. I started with counselling when Troy first died, but it wasn't successful. I was just getting a pity party most of the time, saying how hard it must have been for me. I was going to give counselling away, and I thought, okay, I'll go. So I've got a wonderful girlfriend who took me every 2 weeks to Sydney, and Lisa was amazing. She didn't give me a pity party. She gave me tools to help and to cope with what had happened. Because at the end of the day, your friends aren't going to tell you anything that they don't think you want to hear. And sometimes you need to be told something, and they don't know the facts either. They don't know the science or anything like that. So I was after somebody to try and explain to me something that I didn't understand. And I've been lucky enough to get some sort of help with that.
But I've been lucky enough that my family has seen me go down enough through my teenage years, through my 20s, well, through my early 20s, and lately, that they're the people that pick up on it. They're the ones who notice.
I'd say definitely my family, my partner, and my therapist as well. Like, my good therapist who actually helps me and doesn't like yell at me or do awful things. Need someone who actually takes what you say seriously when you say that you're considering suicide. I remember one time where I told my therapist that I didn't feel safe going home. She didn't want me to go home before we came out with a care plan, and called the mental health line and made sure that someone was there to pick me up and take me home. And I really appreciated that because I'd never experienced that before. Like, someone who genuinely cared and was a therapist.
Biggest support system would be my parents. Really supportive with everything. I had to leave school twice to have time off because I wasn't well, and they completely supported me. They didn't get angry that I wanted to quit school. They just let me find my own way. And also, as I said, my GP. She was amazing, and she always knew what to do to make me feel better.